Welcome aboard the Cruise Aficionados Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Boyle. As always, welcome. I am the founder and owner of cruiseaficionados.com. If you haven't joined us before, welcome, and hope you'll visit us once again as we continue to add new podcasts in the future. Today we have a few segments. We have some notes about cruiseaficionados.com, some notes about future content on the site, a Royal Caribbean fan update, as well as an Angry Cruiser update. And you probably haven't experienced that yet because we haven't posted one yet. As always, in the future, if you aren't able to join us through our hosting service at Podbean, you can also find us on YouTube by way of cruiseaficionados.com or just by searching us on your search engine of choice. Jumping straight into the cruise notes and such for the coming week here. We have, of course, our forums up and running, and as was noted in our update log on our website just last week, the cruise review system is live. If you've gotten cruises past or present that you're looking to share with others, we hope you'll drop by. Feel free to submit your own review of your cruise or the hotels you stayed in while you were waiting to go on your cruise, or for that matter, the excursions, the shops, and the ports that you had an opportunity to enjoy. It's all reviewable at cruiseaficionados.com. This week, I wanted to touch, at least in the Cruise Aficionados podcast, a bit about what I posted on the blog this week, and it was in relation to some of the email and the news I saw cycling through both Google and the online communities about Norwegian Cruise Lines, and they're adding a la carte pricing to some of the optional, and on other cruise lines you would simply call it premium dining experiences they have aboard their ships. And in this particular case, what has rubbed what I would call, in a non-hostile kind of way, the old guard, what has rubbed some people the wrong way, is that Norwegian Cruise Lines has made it, in some cases, an a la carte menu pricing system. Now, this taken out of context might strike people as a bit alarming or somehow grossly over the top, and it's been very quickly, I believe, miscategorized as an attempt to nickel and dime passengers. And if you didn't know the full history of the evolution of dining on board Norwegian Cruise Lines, or for that matter the cruise industry at large, you might actually be a bit alarmed yourself, especially if you were new to cruising. One of the things I started Cruise Aficionados for was to host the New to Cruising Guide, and there's actually part of the purpose behind it is to establish a historical context. If you're new to cruising and you really want to understand what it's about, where it came from, what shaped and molded the things that you're experiencing on a cruise, the New to Cruising Guide at Cruise Aficionados is really for you. It's why I write it. It's to help you enjoy and understand things that are going on around you if you've never gone on a cruise and you want to try to get up to speed on that. Now, for those of you who may have been on a few cruises already, you may be looking at this and wondering, okay, what's the fuss? Is this something I need to know about? Is cruising becoming something I do or do not want to continue doing? Well, let's bring it all together here and look at everything from the top down. The reaction that we're seeing is simply the usual cruising establishment reacting to any kind of a new charge. Such things are inevitable, and they bring laments that traditional cruising is being whisked away to the history books. The changes are neither new nor really out of line, as I really looked into it and started to think back historically and putting everything in its context. In this case, let's focus on the a la carte pricing for optional premium dining on NCL ships. In other words, for those who are newer to cruising, going to a restaurant on a ship in which you need a reservation and for which there is at least a cover charge to dine at it. Such things are premium dining options. NCL made a name for itself over a decade ago when the line was struggling. This was back around 1999, 2000 or so. It was trying to build a reality, an identity for itself, amidst fierce competition from Royal Caribbean and the collective Carnival brands. It was at the time still owned by an Asian cruise company which had, for years, miserably failed, frankly, to manage Norwegian Cruise Lines well. And in 2000, one of the final things they really did before finally starting to try to exit the business was to have a major change in the philosophy of their cruising. Some people thought it was a Hail Mary, in the sign of being desperate to do something to get attention, but it really wasn't. It was called freestyle cruising. What freestyle cruising did was to take the model of cruising where you had a single main dining area, a single main dining room, and all dining activities would basically center around that. Where freestyle differed was it began with the establishment of restaurants throughout the ship. These would be places that you had to make reservations for, because let's be honest, folks, you can't have 2,500 people randomly deciding to show up to a single restaurant location on a cruise ship and have it go well. So yes, they had reservations. You had to book ahead of time so they would know you were coming, but there was no charge for it. If you booked your cruise, it was no real difference between going to the main dining room and going to these restaurants. You simply had the option of choosing traditional main dining, doing that all the way through, or going to these restaurants as you saw fit, and of course, as always, the open seating buffet that almost every single ship on Earth has in some shape or form. Norwegian was like any other cruise line. They have gone and added premium restaurants as well. And these premium restaurants, and increasingly even the standard dining package restaurants, essentially have cover charges. And that in and of itself was something most people could deal with. If you were paying up front for something, you were going there because the food would be of a special high quality. The cuts of steak would be of a very premium type of beef that frankly would not be affordable to go and provide to 2,500 people, any night of the cruise. Or the lobster would be particularly spectacular. Whatever the case, it was a notch above even the high quality food in main dining. And people have adopted this, and even I have experienced it. I was a skeptic about these types of things, especially when I was going on Royal Caribbean, but I'm something of a convert now. I've done it. I've enjoyed it. I have found that, yes, the service and the food has, in my experience anyway, has actually been above and beyond what you would normally get in main dining, to in no way belittle the quality of what goes on in most main dining rooms, though. In this case, though, where things have changed and alarmed some of the establishment cruisers is that some of the restaurants have gone to an a la carte pricing scale, where you would normally go to these premium restaurants, you would simply pay up front 30, 40, whatever dollar amount for eating there. Now some of these places have gone to a traditional restaurant system whereby you have a bill of fare and prices attached to it. But that is the only thing that these people have really focused on in all of the fuss we've seen online recently. And there's frankly more to it than that. There are still dining packages, just as there are on other cruise lines, where you simply pay up front, you get a significant discount for doing so, and you can go to any of these premium dining locations and know you're not going to be charged on an a la carte scale. If there are any exceptions to that, they usually give you a credit of $30 or $40 of that particular charge towards any of the a la carte items you might order. So there isn't anything that actually changed about all of this. There isn't anything radical about it. This is just the evolution of what has been a well-received idea, and it's continuing to grow now. And it's frankly, if anything, giving more depth of options to people on a cruise, either the ones they've booked or when they show up in the ship and are trying to make up their mind on what to do. If you're investigating going on a cruise, if you're investigating Norwegian Cruise Lines, for example, to be fair and honest, this shouldn't really dissuade you. First off, you still have all of the same options you had before. Main dining, the open buffets, these are all there for you, and they are, as always, free of charge. There are the premium restaurants. If you want to go to those premium restaurants and pay up front, do take a look to see if you can get a deal before you get there. You might be able to book 3 for the price of 2. You might be able to get 30-40% discounted off of what it is you would normally pay if you decide the day you get on board the ship to go and try it. So it's worth thinking up front about whether you're going to do this or not as well. And I think too that's also what they're getting at with a la carte pricing, is that if you wait, you may wind up pricing yourself a little higher in terms of what you're going to pay. And this gives greater value to buying these packages up front. It's less guessing, lower prices. A la carte's there. Maybe you have a grandmother, grandfather, or another traveling companion that comes with you, and they frankly don't want to eat the meal, but they'd like to share the meal or the time with you. they can sit down, have something to drink, or have a dessert, or whatever the case might be. And that's an option, frankly, that doesn't exist right now, where you'd have to pay the entire charge up front. So for whatever reaction you see online, for all the fuss I'm seeing online, I don't necessarily see it as really being much more than just idle gossip and kvetching. That's a Yiddish term, by the way, kvetching. It's one of my favorites. So that's the Cruise Aficionados journal entry for this podcast. Certainly keep an eye on our podcasts here for future entries. And in the meantime, we will segue from this part of the program over to the Royal Caribbean Update. The Royal Caribbean Fan Update this week brings us back to a usual reminder that yes, RoyalCaribbeanFan.com does exist, and it is not the same as Cruise Aficionados. If you visited and enjoyed our website, I'm very pleased to know that. And for many of you who have known me over the last 15, 20-odd years, you know also that all of this really got started in 1998 with a small web page related to a cruise I was taking a year later on board the old Sovereign of the Seas. From that came Royal Caribbean Fan, and over the years it has grown significantly, and we'll be returning to reactive hot rotation come this January with our next bit of news, which I refer to as, and we'll be calling, the Oasis Cycle. Those of you who follow Royal Caribbean know its largest flagship is the Oasis of the Seas, as well as her sister ship, the Allure of the Seas. And I have yet actually to get a chance to cruise on either of them. That comes to an end in this January, as I'll be going and returning to the fleet with my esteemed travel companion, Lacey Kornicki. And we will be traveling on Oasis of the Seas for the milk run out and around the Caribbean, and the usual stops in Cozumel and Falmouth and a few other little spots in between. In midsummer is really the one I'm maybe the most excited about, because I'm both a geek and a father at the same time. My two children, my then 12-year-old daughter Victoria and my then 10-year-old son Benjamin, will be traveling with me on our first family cruise aboard Allure of the Seas. Finally, as always during my usual January cycle, we will be cruising, myself and Lacey once again, aboard the Harmony of the Seas, which will be entering revenue service in 2016. Of course, I'm also starting to make plans and look ahead towards the fourth unit of the Oasis class that's due to be coming online a year beyond that. But of course, like most people, I don't have any of the details on that, but I look forward to exploring them and discussing them with you, both here in the podcast and at cruiseaficionados.com when we have the opportunities over 2016. Looking forward to her debut in another year or so.
Is there anyone there?
Yes, for QC.
Say it! Say it!
I want you to get up right now and go to the window, open it, and stick your head out and yell,
Iceberg, further ahead!
Sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down, sit down there, rockin' up, boat.
The sportos, motorheads, geeks, sluts, bloods, wastoids, dweebies, dickheads, they all adore him.
For this reason above all,
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
I've sent them you.
They think he's a righteous dude.
Good answer. I like the way you think. I'm gonna be watching you.
This week I'm stepping back some to the middle of the summer, and an event that I read about and was fairly close to, at least geographically. And it occurred at where I spend most of the time during a summer where I'm not actually on a cruise ship, or for that matter at work, and that is at Cedar Point Amusement Park in Sandusky, Ohio. Anyone in the Midwest probably knows what that is. Those of you who are not in our immediate geographic region, Cedar Point is an ancient, over 145-year-old amusement park on the north shore of Lake Erie. It's historic. It has a beautiful white sand beach off the freshwater lake. Used to be, ironically enough, since this is a cruise podcast, used to be serviced significantly by Great Lakes cruise ships that would come from throughout the Great Lakes to deliver passengers to the renowned beach, to the historic Hotel Breakers Resort Hotel, and in later years the amusement park itself, which of course featured roller coasters, rides, and attractions of that nature. With anything, any human endeavor, you inevitably get the short bus foam helmet wearing crowd that will go and do something of such profound stupidity that it causes the perhaps well-intended gentle hearts in our society to subsequently overreact and start preaching that we need to do more, duct tape, people's hands behind their back, put foam on everything, and put warning signs on every conceivable object we interact with. And such it was in the middle of this summer. A roller coaster by the name of Raptor had a passenger, a recently promoted teacher in a public school district in Ohio. And this gentleman, father of at least 2 daughters, rode his roller coaster and apparently lost his iPhone. Never mind the fact that on your ticket in the front gates, on the entryway to any and all of these roller coasters, as well as what they tell you verbally and directly as you're boarding the ride, and even before they set the train in motion to go through the ride, that you're responsible for any objects that you may fall or drop during the course of the ride, that they cannot be responsible for the loss of items such as that. They give you cubby holes that you can put all of your random objects in and leave them there while your train spends 2 minutes running around a set of tracks. They do everything short of have you take a multi-part test to know that you're not supposed to be hauling things like phones around with you because you might drop them. Well, this gentleman did. And like a lot of people, being a grizzled veteran of Cedar Point myself, I can appreciate that he thought he knew where he dropped this. And in this particular case, it was at the bottom of the very first loop that the ride goes through. And this ride is the type that you sit in a chair and your feet dangle below you too as well. So bear that in mind. This gentleman, after his ride concludes, gets off and on his own walks around to an area that is behind a 6-foot fence. A fence which has signs on it saying restricted area, stay out. A fence around a ride that makes horrifically loud noise as it's running, preparing to run as the trains are coming down the hill. That in absolutely no possible way could any rational human being look at and not realize it's a profoundly stupid thing to go past the signs that say no entry, to climb the fence that says restricted area, danger, stay out, and then to walk around looking for his iPhone. So this guy does get over the fence. He's walking around this grassy area. And you can see it coming. He didn't, but you can see it coming that as he's looking around, another train comes down the tracks. And at this point, the train's probably doing some 70 miles an hour. And this guy neither notices that it's coming down the hill, which is almost impossible not to know or see. But either way, he winds up getting his head kicked by at least 3 different people on the ride, and he's dead. And that's almost a side topic to the story. It is tragic. These daughters are going to have to grow up without their father. It is tragic that these daughters are going to have to go through high school being the daughters of the guy who got his head kicked in by a roller coaster ride behind 3 fences and a host of signs saying, this is a stupid thing to do, don't do it. But all of that being tragic unto itself, and as a father of 2 children, I wouldn't wish this on anyone. The children to have to go through, or that guy to have to walk through the pearly gates with a big sign that says, I was a frickin' idiot for doing this. But what really bothered me the most, was the predictable response. Aside from the understandable and appropriate, outpouring of good wishes to the daughter and, sympathies for that tragedy, however dumb the move the guy made, it was in the Cleveland Plain Dealer less than a week later that I read an article by a guy whose entire livelihood is made up by essentially suing people on the behalf of people who do profoundly stupid things exactly like this, who did not represent the family and ultimately has not represented the family and with any luck never will. But he was trying to get himself positioned by getting himself interviewed by that newspaper, putting forward the idea that the 6-foot fences, the signs all over every fence in the entire park saying, don't cross this fence line, it's dangerous. All of the common sense required to look at that and realize you're not supposed to do this was totally irrelevant, and it wasn't enough. That clearly this man did not fully realize his danger. You know the story. It's an ambulance chaser. He's trying to get someone to sign him on so he can go and sue somebody and hoping to get a settlement out of it. I have no love of these types of people in general because they are the purveyors of what you would call change in their point of view, or reforms. These are the people who try to put Nerf helmets on all of us and to basically ruin almost anything in our lives by constantly dumbing things down and constantly trying to make us safe from the lowest common denominator of moron on this earth. So it was with that in mind, as I was reading through this article, I was reminded of something else. And that was, of course, this somewhat recently popular topic in the media of passengers falling off of cruise ships. And if you've followed cruising at all, if you've gone on a cruise or two, you realize that these ships, they float on water and they go out into the ocean. And the ocean is made up of water, and there is a lot of this water, and this water is very deep. And sometimes these ships go very far away from land where you might be able to swim to. You might also have noticed some of the signs that indicate, you shouldn't lean over the side, or the large yellow, signs that tell you not to climb out on top of lifeboats and things of this nature. And we've all noticed recently, in the last few years, people seem to be frequently ignoring all of this advice. People are jumping off of ships randomly. Some of them are committing suicide. Some of them are simply drunk, stumbling and falling off of a ship. But the truth is, more often than not, these are people doing just simply premeditated, stupid things and wind up getting in trouble, falling off the ship because of it. So as I read this newspaper article of a lawyer, talking about how this guy could not possibly have been aware of his danger in climbing over a fence, guarding against people getting near a roller coaster moving at very high speed, I was reminded of a certain senator from the state of New York whose passion, I can only describe it as being, is to bring up at least one new law quarterly in which he tries to push what he considers to be, sensible regulation of the cruise industry. Now, I'm not interested in digging into the politics of it, except to say that it seems a rather opportunistic thing to me, at least doing that as he does, much as this lawyer in Cleveland does, much as many like them on certain websites do, in the way that they simply try to take advantage of people doing stupid things. We can't protect the world from stupidity. It's genetic, I suppose. It's inescapable. If there is something that can be done in a profoundly stupid way, it will be done by somebody at some point in time. And unfortunately, there'll always be a lawyer or a politician seeking to take advantage of it by getting someone to sue someone or to try to push through legislation because it's an easy target in their opinion. That was the Angry Cruiser segment for this week. It was just something that's been burning in my craw for several weeks now since the summertime came to an end. And in the meantime, I invite you to visit our forums at cruiseaficionados.com. Visit here frequently to listen to the Cruise Aficionados podcast for the Royal Caribbean Update and the Angry Cruiser. And I am, as always, your host, Nathan Boyle. Cruise angry, and when you can't be on board, be online at cruiseaficionados.com. Thanks, folks. Talk to you next time.